All right, let's just jump right into this explainer with a pretty massive question. What happens when a local community uncovers critical inconsistencies in the environmental reports of a major corporation operating right in their own backyard? You know, when the paperwork, the actual physical landscape, and the legal obligations just don't seem to align at all.
Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're basically putting on our auditor hats. We're going to review a really dense, highly detailed 2026 open letter and environmental dossier. This was compiled by local citizens and supported by findings from the Public Prosecutor's Office, and it raises some very serious concerns about Tronox Pigmentos do Brasil, which is this massive industrial facility in Camaçari, Bahia. We're going to look strictly at what these source documents allege, examining the gaps between what's reported on paper and what the community claims is actually happening on the ground.
Here's our roadmap for the audit today. We'll start with the Tronox case, look at some bureaucratic flaws, dive into water and waste, check out air and safety, and finally wrap up with the legal consequences.
Okay, let's start with Section 1, the Tronox case.
So the source documents tell us that local residents from surrounding communities, places like Edias, Jawa, Tucunere, and Interlagos, actually got together and compiled a comprehensive open letter on April 30, 2026. Backed by findings from the Public Prosecutor's Office, or the MPBA, this document was created to highlight what they see as severe operational and legal gaps at the Tronox plant. The community is basically arguing that historical degradation just isn't being properly mitigated, and they've laid out quite the paper trail to prove their point.
Moving right along to Section 2, bureaucratic flaws.
Now, as you probably know, in the world of environmental compliance, paperwork is literally everything. And the open letter alleges that basic registration data here is fundamentally flawed across several official forms. We're talking about incorrect or diverging corporate tax IDs, those are known as CNPJs in Brazil, and inconsistent state registrations. Even more wild, the dossier claims that in at least 5 critical items, information was filled out and signed by unidentified third parties who didn't even have the formal legal links to do so. No proper technical authorizations, no power of attorney. So why does this matter? Well, it fragments accountability. If an environmental incident happens, having tangled, messy paperwork makes it incredibly difficult for regulators to pinpoint exactly who is legally responsible.
Okay, let's shift from the paperwork to the physical environment in Section 3, water and waste.
To really ground ourselves geographically, just take a look at the layout of this facility. The industrial sector is nestled right up against vital natural features. We're talking dune sectors, the Capivara River, and local residential areas. Because of this extreme proximity, managing water and waste isn't just some abstract regulatory checkbox, right? It has immediate, physical implications for the surrounding ecosystem and the people living next door.
Now this part is highly concerning. The community highlights a direct excerpt from the company's own environmental guarantee report and actually notes an absence of monitoring results for 2 specific water bodies, Lagoon 6 and Lagoon 7. And the reason? The report states they were experiencing water unavailability. Basically, they were completely dry, or effectively extinct. The community dossier flags this as a huge issue. Under Brazilian law, a water body is a public good. You can't just let a monitored lagoon dry up without a clear, technically documented reason, whether that's due to silting, over-extraction, or contamination. The dossier argues this could configure an omission of environmental damage.
The documents also point to a seriously mysterious issue with waste disposal. The company reports sending unreacted ore waste to an industrial landfill. Sometimes it's called Aterro Four-Cores, other times Quatro Arcos. But here's the kicker. The dossier notes that this landfill lacks precise geographical coordinates in the official documentation. In fact, simple public searches fail to locate an actual industrial landfill operating under that name anywhere in the region. You search it, and you get logistics companies or completely unrelated sites. So for the auditors, this raises immediate suspicions. Where are thousands of tons of industrial waste actually ending up?
To fully grasp why this matters, we got to talk about an MTR, or the Waste Transport Manifest. This is a mandatory national online tool used in Brazil. It's designed to trace solid waste from the exact moment it's generated all the way to its final destination. It's the ultimate tool for transparency and regulatory oversight.
So, the really crucial point the open letter makes is that Tronox allegedly bypassed this official national tracing system completely for its waste. Instead, the dossier claims the company relied heavily on a private, internal tracking system called SOGI. And the problem is, SOGI lacks the official seal of the environmental regulators. By skipping the mandated national system, the community argues the company is operating in the dark, effectively violating national solid waste policies.
On top of that, the dossier flags the company's own historical graph for conductivity and pH. The report uses vague phrasing, saying things like, the pH remained within the historical profile. The community pushes back on this hard, arguing that historical profile isn't a scientifically rigorous way to confirm compliance with actual legal standards. It leaves the true health of the water table totally up in the air.
Which brings us to Section 4, Air and Safety. A huge issue raised here is compliance with CONEMA 506. If you're not familiar, that is a super strict 2024 environmental resolution in Brazil that severely elevated the standards for air quality management. It requires very precise monitoring and modeling to make absolutely sure industrial emissions aren't harming public health.
Well, according to the dossier, Tronox is allegedly operating without this now mandatory atmospheric dispersion modeling. Without this digital thermometer, or early warning system really, it's impossible to predict how a plume of pollution will behave during a critical episode. To make matters worse, the documents highlight that a key community monitoring station in Areias was actually suspended back in 2021 due to quote-unquote personal safety issues. The letter argues that without this dispersion modeling, and with literal blind spots in community monitoring, both local residents and the factory workers themselves are left dangerously in the dark about what they might be breathing in.
Let's see how all this adds up in our final section, legal consequences. So a major red flag the documents point out is the claim that Tronox has only partially fulfilled its TAC. A TAC is a legally binding conduct adjustment agreement made with the public prosecutor's office. Think of it as a final chance to correct illegalities out of court. The community claims that because the company hasn't fully complied with it, the conciliatory phase is pretty much exhausted, which opens the door for some very severe judicial action.
Because of these alleged infractions, the company is looking at accountability across 3 distinct spheres in Brazil. In the civil sphere, they'd be obligated to repair the damage and pay compensations. Administratively, they could face massive fines and even the total revocation of their operating licenses. And in the penal sphere, managers and directors can actually face criminal sanctions, including imprisonment, if they're found to have knowingly allowed pollution to continue.
And guys, the financial stakes outlined in the dossier are just staggering. According to the documents, if the company is found guilty of severe environmental crimes, like contaminating the water table with heavy metals or untreated effluents, administrative fines alone can hit up to 50 million reals per infraction. Let that sink in. And that's before we even talk about the millions more that could be demanded in collective moral damages by the affected communities.
But the open letter warns it's not just about paying a fine. If a key piece of infrastructure, like the facility's hydraulic barrier, is found to be failing, and contamination is proven to be active rather than just some historical artifact, the company could face the total paralysis of its plant. Plus, in today's market, operating in the dark environmentally means blocked access to public credit lines, like those from the National Development Bank, and a massive hit to their ESG ratings.
Ultimately, this commissary dossier leaves us with one really provocative question. When the local community and public prosecutors are pointing to missing landfill coordinates, dry lagoons, absent air quality models, and bypassed national waste tracking systems, the trust in self-reported environmental data really begins to fracture. Considering the sheer volume of these alleged inconsistencies, the open letter asks, is a fully independent, third-party technical audit the only way to uncover the truth and ensure the safety of the environment and the public? It is a fascinating look into the complexities of environmental compliance and what happens when a community decides to push back. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep asking the tough questions.